All right, this is the wonderful Canon A1. I've always been a Nikon shooter my whole life. I've always shot Nikon cameras professionally, but the Canon A1 was their flagship, state-of-the-art, whiz-bang camera, because when it came out, it was the first camera to have aperture priority, shutter priority, and full program, where the camera will set both the shutter and the aperture based on the lighting conditions. It has a great smart build. Find one that has a shutter that sounds like it's working. As I describe in all of these, you want to test out the shutters, make sure that they're all working at different speeds. When you change this from aperture, this little ring right here changes the settings from TV, which they use for shutter priority. Their T is time, and AV for aperture priority. If you have it on the time mode, then there are shutter speeds in this little window, if you can see that. If you change it to the AV mode, then the apertures are visible in that window. I'm not a shutter priority guy. I typically shoot aperture priority because I'm usually shooting wide open, or I'm shooting on the street and I need to be able to shoot quickly. And I'm not always worried about speed as much as I'm worried about how much is in focus and how shallow is it, or how much can I get in focus if I'm zone focusing for street. This camera, it has a lock over here so that you can keep it and prevent it from shooting and not waste film when you don't want it to be. When you turn it on A, you can hear the shutter. If I put it on, this is 1/4 of a second, it says. That sounded a lot longer than 1/4 of a second. Oh, I know why, because that's actually 4 seconds. This is 1/4 of a second. They actually code their full seconds in yellow and their partial seconds in white. So this is 1/2 a second. That sounds about right. This is 1 second. Okay, I'm happy with their slow shutter speeds. 30th. 125. Canon has that distinctive whiny shutter sound. It's a distinctive sound that you can always tell a Canon. None of the Nikons that I have around here, none of the other bodies sound like this with that little springy, whiny sound. But that's common for Canon, and there's nothing wrong with that. All the A1s, all the AE1s, AE1 programs, you'll find that in all of those. It's not exactly stealth. So to put it on program, there's a P setting up in here, up in this little window. And then you got to put the lens on the A setting for automatic. So that gives the camera complete control over all the apertures and all the shutter speeds. Like I said, I'm not a big program guy. I like to change my aperture and control what I'm working with shutter speeds. I typically will work in aperture priority. Now, the way this camera would like you to work in aperture priority is you put it on the AV mode, you put this in A setting, and when it's in that A setting on the lens, then you change the aperture with this little wheel. So this wheel actually has aperture values inside of it. I can see 1.4, 2, 2.8. So you use that to change the aperture, and that electronically changes the aperture setting instead of using the physical ring. You can still shoot in full manual. You can still shoot in a aperture or shutter priority, but expose with a exposure compensation. It has a plus-minus wheel over here next to the ASA speed. This one came with a little ring eye cup. That's kind of nice. Sometimes it makes it when you're trying to open it. Sometimes they catch on the door. I always look inside to see what's the inside look like. I see foam all through these channels. They look like they're in pretty good shape. Sometimes they're not. And you can replace those or have them replaced, but that's a little bit more work and expense. This one looks like it's in pretty good shape. And I would take a little bit of canned air and blow out any dust in there. You got to kind of bend up the eye cup when you want to shut the back. It has a terminal if you want to put a external flash into it. It's got a little lever down here that lets you do depth of field preview. Lets you see how much is in focus. It's got a little lock button in case you want to not accidentally bump this from the setting that it's on, because they found out that people were like hitting that little wheel inadvertently. So they put in this little block. It's just a physical block of that wheel. And that's what that little lever's for. Should check inside the camera. The release button is actually on the lens right here. And inside the body, it looks like it's really clean. There's no foam dripping on the mirror. There's no sticky residue anywhere. The back of the lens has no scratches, or it's just in generally good shape. It looks clean. We have to check to see when we put it on like a f16 or f11. We put it on a slow shutter speed. We should be able to see the aperture close down. And I can see that. Can you see that? Okay, so the aperture blades are working. They're not slowly closing, which means they're not blurry and, they're not sticky. So I highly recommend it. I like the Canon A1 a lot. Get yourself one. Put some pictures on the web and send them to me. We'll put them on the site here and make a link to it. All right, I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.